Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 85 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. Jason here, and holy cow, I'm just blown away by today's guest. So let me start by welcoming all the Megheads and Loch Squad fans out there. Like myself, I am one of you. Greetings and welcome to the show. We are going to have the incredible Steve Alten as our guest today. I mean, here we are, episode 85. We're just 15 episodes away from 100, and I have Steve Alten on the show. I mean, pinch me. This is one of my bucket list authors that when I began the show, I actually made a list of authors, and Steve's name was right there at the top of authors who I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to talk to this guy. Never expected this to happen. So to be sitting here telling you that yes, he's going to be coming up in just a minute, I'm just blown away and extremely humbled that Steve would take the time. I mean, oh my gosh. What can I say? I just keep thinking about when the Skype camera turned on. You know, I didn't expect him to have the camera on, but now his camera comes on and there's Steve Alten wearing a Meg shirt and everything. I mean, how awesome is that, right? Oh man. Anyway, but yeah, we're gonna get to all that here in just a moment. So stay tuned for our interview with Steve Alten. So yes, I said Megheads and Loch Squad fans, all of you who might be tuning in for the first time, welcome. This is the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. And, you know, you don't have to be an international New York Times bestselling author to be a guest on the show. Essentially, if you've written a book and it's been published, whether you are traditionally published or indie published, you are now in the club. And you are welcome to contact me about coming on the show, because you never know from week to week if I'm going to have a first-time author putting out a book of poetry. Like we've had some incredible poets lately. Some incredible horror authors here a while back, some sci-fi. You just never know who's going to be on the show from week in to week out. And anymore, I really don't even talk about that they are indie or traditional, because we're all in the same boat. Once you've written a book, and that book is published, we're all in the same boat. You know, it's now up to us most of the time to figure out, okay, how do I let people know? How do I let people beyond my inner circle of friends and family? How do I tell the people in the next town over or the next state over or on the other side of the world that, hey, I wrote a book. I think you're going to like it. That's what I'm trying to do with this show, is provide a platform for authors, new and experienced alike, to share their work with people all over the world. And, I think it's, so far, it's turning out pretty good. We're having a good turnout. We've had incredible authors all throughout. Not a bad episode yet. So we're just going to keep on pushing. And if you are a published author and you're interested in coming on the show, or maybe you have a recommendation of a friend who's a published author, reach out to me at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll try and set something up. Make sure that you follow the show on all of our social media platforms. We are on Facebook and Twitter. We're also on all podcast platforms as well, including YouTube, which is catching on pretty fast. There's several subscribers on there now. It's only been up for a couple months, so that's exciting to see all the views popping up on YouTube. And make sure that you are hitting that subscribe button. Leave us a review if you like, but mainly, if you come to an episode that you like, which means you found an author and a book that you're interested in, make sure you leave a review for that author once you finished reading it. Because, again, whether this is your first book or your 18th book, we all love reviews. So make sure you post a review on Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever it is you got your book. Make sure you post a review to tell the world what you think of the book. Make sure you're also checking out the links in the show notes for our friends of the show and sponsors like U-Tor-All. U-Tor-All is the premier place for self-storage in the Warrensburg area. Fall is almost here. I mean, football just started, so fall is upon us, which means winter is going to be here before you know it. Maybe you want to make sure you have room in the garage for the car so that you don't have to shovel off a bunch of snow before you go to work in the morning. Maybe you've got family coming for the holidays and you need to cleaning out that extra bedroom to make some room, contact U-Sto-All for any and all of your self-storage needs. They have climate control and non-climate control, fully fenced-in facilities, gated access with more than 60 cameras recording 24 hours a day. Not only is it a very clean facility, as a bunch of the reviews say, and people I've talked to, in fact, but it's also a green facility, as both of their facilities are run on solar power. So make sure you're checking them out online at U-Sto-All.net. That is the letter U, STORALL.net. I also want to thank my favorite writing software, Scrivener. I use Scrivener every day, whether I have just a spare 5 minutes at work for my lunch break or whatever, and all I can think about is, I've got this one idea. I know how I'm going to fix this now in my story. I can pull up Scrivener on my phone, get right into my work in progress, and update it. Start working it out right on there. Most mornings, that's my writing time. I go in there and open up my laptop and start doing some writing. And then in the evenings, here at my desktop computer where I do all the editing, it's all done on Scrivener because everything I need is right there. All my chapters, I can move them around like index cards if one chapter needs to move somewhere else. All my research, my character references, everything is right there, like they said, within reach. In just a minute, you're going to hear an advertisement for Scrivener. And don't forget to try out that coupon code CHAPTER to save yourself 20% on your desktop order. I also want to thank my friends at popgoestheculture.com. Joey Mills and the gang back on the air with Pop Goes the Culture podcast. That's the flagship show of the network, a network which I am very happy to be a part of. They have that show and many others. Another one of my favorites is the Alamo Backlot, which they get together every week with people from the Alamo Drafthouse, and they talk about movie news and movie events and new movies that are coming out, what happened last week at the movie theaters. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy that because I'm a big movie fan myself, and it's a lot of fun to listen to. And, and I've found out just recently that was really cool was that the events that they talk about at Alamo, they're talking about Alamo Springfield, but the events that they talk about are often throughout all of Alamo. I just noticed here recently there was an event that they were talking about, and I looked at my local one up here near Kansas City, and I'll be darned, yeah, they have the same event. So make sure that when you're tuning in and you hear about something that's fun coming up, check online for your local Alamo and see if they're also doing that same event, because it very well could be. Anyway, check out that and much more. Lots of pop culture blogs and other amazing shows at popgoestheculture.com. Click the link in the show notes. Well, speaking of my sponsor, U-Sto-All, we were together at the Get the Rat Out event last week here for UCM, University of Central Missouri. It was a great event, lots and lots of fun, thousands of people walking around. It was really interesting. I had my booth. Imagine seeing a table, and that's my booth right in the middle. To one side was the writing club that I'm a part of, so I got to talk to people about the writing club and, hey, come and join us. We meet twice a month. We talk about our books. We get experience, or we get critique and so on. And we had a sample of all of our published authors that are in the group. And then on my other side was U-Sto-All. The manager, Mike, was there, and he was handing out chip clips and pens. And, don't tell Mike, but yeah, I grabbed a bunch of chip clips and pens. So I'm actually making my notes right now using a U-Sto-All pen. Anyway, but it was a lot of fun. We had a good time. And what was really cool was there was a booth right across the street from me, Arcade Magazine. And this is such a cool thing. It's Arcade Magazine is the University of Central Missouri's student literary journal. They publish poetry, short fiction, creative nonfiction, and visual art submitted by UCM's undergraduate students. How cool is that? I wanted to make sure and give them a shout out, because if you are someone who is celebrating other, authors, artists, lift them up, giving them an outlet to share their work with the world, then I'm going to give you a shout out. It's really cool. Make sure you check them out. I've got links in the show notes for them. And it was really, really cool. Very happy to get to talk to them. And I look forward to, I'm not a UCM student, but maybe I'll try and sneak into one of their meetings at their creative writing club sometime. Don't tell them I'm coming. I'll put on my UCM clothes and try and blend in. I might have to shave, though. Anyway, speaking of people who like to share and help others, my guest today, Steve Alten, we get to talk about all kinds of things, including his incredible Adopt an Author program. Tells us a little bit about that. It's not just helping authors, but it's helping classrooms and helping students want to read again, which is, I mean, how awesome is that, right? I mean, that's a really cool thing. It's important to read. And so many students, they want to play a game, they want to watch a movie, they don't want to do other things. So this is a very encouraging program that Steve put together, and it's just awesome. We also talk about his influences, how he began with the Meg series, what inspired him to write that. He gives some writing tips, and he also has more writing tips available on his website. And speaking of the website, that is your exclusive place to get all of his new release books. All of his future releases are going through Steve himself personally on his website at stevealten.com. That's where you can pre-order things like today's book, The Loch, Heaven's Lake. And what I think is really cool about this is he's kind of become like almost like an independent author himself, because rather than going through a huge publisher and they're putting out the book and they're doing all the things that they want to do and doing it their way, Steve is in total control, and I completely respect this. And he's got a special limited edition hardcover for the book, like this new one, The Loch, Heaven's Lake. You can pre-order that one, and then as soon as it's ready, he'll send it out to you. So that's a really cool thing. I made sure last year to go through his website, because I'm also a member of his newsletter, which get on over to stevealten.com and sign up for the newsletter. It's going to pop up as soon as you go. Trust me. It's a really cool newsletter. One of the coolest newsletters that I look into every month. I make sure and read all the way through. And that's where he has his deals. And that is such a cool thing. Last year, I made sure to go in and get the collector's edition of The Loch, book 1 of this series. Let's see here. I actually got it right here with me. I have, all right, here you go. For example, like I said, limited edition, okay? My book is number 691 out of 750 copies, and it's autographed. So there you go. I mean, now you know there's only going to be a limited edition of these first run books of The Loch, Heaven's Lake. So you want to make sure you get over there right now and pre-order yours. I've got mine. I made sure to leave him a note, because there's a section on there where you can leave a note for Steve's kind of special comments or anything like that. The one thing I am upset about was I did miss out, though. He had a really cool thing. I'm a huge fan of his Meg series. That's what I fell in love with back 20 years ago when it first came out. And he had a big thing going on recently, special collector's edition of the original Meg book, Meg Tooth Fragment, all this kind of stuff. And I missed my chance. Oh my gosh, I waited too long. That doggone accent I was in earlier this month just really threw a lot of things off. And I kept thinking, oh yeah, I got to make some time to get over there and order that. So yeah, when I finally made the time to order my Heaven's Lake, time was up. I missed my chance for that Meg. So make sure you don't miss your chance. Get over to stevealten.com. First thing, sign up for the newsletter. Second thing, order your copy. Now stay tuned, because we're going to get over to our interview with Steve Alten here in just a moment. You're going to hear a riveting chapter reading from Heaven's Lake. All that coming up right after a word from our sponsor. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter Podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. And welcome everybody to a very special edition of the Sample Chapter Podcast. Oh my goodness, I am so excited. I have somebody I've been a fan of for over 20 years now, and I'm just thrilled to death that I'm getting a chance to speak with him. I'm talking about New York Times and international best-selling author of at least 18 thrillers, plus one romantic comedy. He's also the co-founder and director of Adopt an Author, a free motivational teenage reading program used by thousands of middle grade and high school teachers throughout the U.S. I'm talking about the one and only Steve Alten. Mr. Alten, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Call me Steve, please. I feel old as it is.
I have a feeling we're probably not that far apart in age, honestly, but still, I like to respect my peers, but I appreciate that, Steve. Well, at this point, you've done so much. I'm kind of trying to figure out a good place to start. What is something throughout your years of interviews, and of course you had the Meg movie last year, what is something you've always wished an interviewer would ask you about, something you wish you could talk about?
That's kind of difficult. Every book is its own promotion, and every promotion, has its own series of questions that lead up to it. So I'm not really promoting anything right now other than I'm about halfway through a new book in the Loch series called The Loch Heaven's Lake. And that is being pre-sold right now. That will only be available to fans who pre-order it. It's not going to be sold in stores. It's not going to be sold on Amazon. And it's something that we did. We tried with Meg Generations, and it turned out really well for the fans because they were the only ones who purchased the book in a pre-sale. And so when a year later, when new fans came along and wanted to read book 6 in the Meg series, they actually had to purchase it from people who bought extra copies of the Generations book in pre-sale. So they're selling it. Some people are selling it for $250 a piece, which is crazy. But God bless them. They had the foresight of ordering extra copies. Go for it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that's a really awesome thing that you've got going, and very unique. There's not a lot of others out there, I think, are doing something along those lines. So this is really cool. I know last year I was working at the theater when the movie came out, and there was one of my coworkers who I know is also a big fan of yours. And when we were drawing names for Christmas, I got his name, so I made sure to order the Loch special edition that came out, and I got a copy for him, and of course, had to add an extra one for myself. So he was thrilled when that came in with the new cover and all that. That was really, really cool. All right, so you kicked it off a little over 20 years ago with the Meg. Is this something that you've always been interested in, like the unexplained? You got, the megalodons, Loch Ness monster, aliens, following up with the Mayan calendar, things like that. Has that always been an interest to you?
Yeah, I write about things that interest me and about things I like to read about. So, yeah, absolutely. I grew up being a Jaws fan, of course, and that got me interested in doing research on great whites. And, there was always a little blurb about Megalodon, and usually accompanied by a black and white shot at the Smithsonian Institute with 6 scientists sitting in a Meg jaw. And so when back in 1995, I was struggling to support a family of 5, and happened to pick up a Time magazine, and the front cover was the Mariana Trench. And the article dealt with hydrothermal vents and this incredible deep sea trench, 7 miles down, 1,500 miles long, 40 miles wide, totally unexplored. And I thought, what was that huge shark that I remember reading about when I was 15, and went to the library because there was no internet back then, and found the photo and found the information about Meg. There wasn't much written about Megalodon back then. And I just decided that I was going to write the book.
Oh, my gosh. I remember, you and I will remember Columbia House. They had the tapes, cassette tapes, and then the book clubs, those kinds of things. So back at that time, I was a member of that. My wife ordered me the Meg when it first came out. And that was the first book I can remember sitting down and reading pretty much cover to cover in a day. I had started it the night before. We were laying down for bed, and what a mistake that was. I think it was 1 a.m. before I finally forced myself to set it down. And then the next day, my entire family was gone. Our oldest daughter had just turned 1, so I was babysitting our newborn. And I just sat in a chair all day with her in my arms and Meg in the other hand and reading that. And yeah, by the time they came home that evening, I was done with the book, and I was just like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe this book. And it was such a blast and so much fun.
Well, it's a quick read. They all are. And brings back memories when I was writing the book. My daughter was only 2. So.
Well, I've been reminded recently, I started up on Night Stalkers, and I've been reminded of just how well you craft a thriller, because you come into a scene where it's, okay, I see what's going to happen, and yet I still find myself cringing and just waiting. The anticipation, the way you build it up. I mean, you've definitely perfected your craft of making us wait for what we think it might happen, and then it may not always go the way we think it's going to go. What was one of your influences to help you craft a thriller in this way?
There's a book called The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, and Vogler was I believe he was some type of professional reader for Hollywood scripts, and he determined that every story that's ever been told has been told before, and laid out, the hero's journey, which is the story of the book. And I think that probably had more of an influence on my writing than any book.
Oh, very nice. I might have to pick one of those up as well. One of the things I really liked, the Loch Ness Monster, you had the Loch, and then, of course, later on, Loch 2, is it Vostok?
Vostok, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. So, and then when that one came out, one of the unique things that you did there was you blended some of your universe together with the. I guess they never did meet, but you put the names started crossing over, and some of your the space adventure, the aliens, all that kind of crossed over, and I started to see and I've really come to appreciate how you've kind of opened it up now to where going forward, so many of your stories could cross over into one another. Is this something maybe we would be seeing going forward? Probably not. It wasn't, it was received about 50-50 by my fans. Some liked the extraterrestrial element, some did not. The reason I included it is because it was part of the research. It's not something that I made up. There actually are electromagnetic readings coming out of Vostok. They're incredibly powerful. And the planes that were flying over the lake and doing all the measurements of the electromagnetic field were shocked to find it. So I'm just taking the facts and spinning them into a story. But the fact that the electromagnetic waves were coming out of this essentially a liquid lake located 2.5 miles underneath the ice. So it's pretty incredible stuff. And I felt that was too important to bystep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things with all of your books. They've all got that truth about them, and you take it and you spin it the way you want to, but still there's always that element of this could be there could be that monster underneath, and something could be waiting for us here or there. And I think that's one of the, I don't know, for me, that was one of the things that's always gripped me about your books is there's that element of truth and yeah, what if it could be happening? Yeah, absolutely. I call it fiction mixed with fact. I like that. So you have your Adopt an Author program. Tell us a little bit about that. Adopt an Author started itself back in 1998, actually 97 when the hardback came out of Meg. And I started getting a lot of email from teenagers who were all telling me the same thing, that they hated reading these books. But when they read Meg, it turned out to be, for a lot of them, the first book they ever finished. And they suddenly started enjoying reading. And then teachers started emailing me, telling me they were using the book in class because it had such a strong teen following. And I'd never written a book for teens. I'd written it for adults. But then I found out that the Young Adult Library Services Association, YALSA, had selected Meg as the #1 book for reluctant readers. And I realized something was happening with teens that I needed to be involved with. So my background is in education. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate degree in education. I'm certified to teach in secondary school. And so I put together the Adopt an Author program, which is basically a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. And it enables us to help the teachers by pulling together their curriculums and adding curriculum ideas of our own. So that a teacher who's in anywhere from 8th to 12th grade who was interested in one of the books, they simply need to go to adoptanauthor.com and they can download free curriculum.
And this really has helped the teachers. The program also offers something unique in that the teacher can arrange to have contact between the author and the students, either through emails or an in-class conference call or a Skype interview. And so it adds an extra dimension to the program. And we started off officially we started in 1999 with about a dozen teachers, and we've now had over 11,000 registered teachers in the last 20 years.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. That's wonderful that you've created something that's really grown this big and helping them find something good to read. And I know, like, for myself, the more we read, the more it informs our writing. Do you have any advice for writers that are starting off?
Yeah, my short piece of advice is don't write a story about something that you know, because that's the reason that you're writing about it. Write about something that you want to read and then go learn about it. And if you go to my website, Steve Alten, ALTEN.com, you can click on writing tips. It's a video that I made years ago, and it gets involved with some of the things that Vogler believes in as well.
Okay, yeah, that's great advice. I will definitely put a link on the show notes for that, so everybody can click on there. And that would be the best place for everybody to go for the pre-orders for upcoming books like The Loch, Heaven's Lake.
Yes, and be sure to sign up for my free newsletter as well, because every month I put out a newsletter at the beginning of the month. It talks about contests to become a character in one of my books. All the characters in my books now are actual readers who have submitted their names for these contests. And so it's a little dose of immortality.
Yeah, I've got to get on one of those one of these days. I'm going to have to throw my name in there one of these days. You have one of those newsletters that I can't miss it. I can't just like, oh yeah, I'll read that later, but then you never get back to it. Yours is one of those I've got to open it up and read it all the way to the bottom to find your little bit of humor that you put at the bottom, the little story that you like to tell. They're always a lot of fun to read. So yeah, definitely everybody sign up for that newsletter. It is really fantastic. So you've got, oh my gosh, I'm not even sure. Is it 7 Meg books at this point and another one coming, or is the 7th what's coming up?
Well, it's 6 and a prequel, and the prequel is now included in the first book, Meg. So, I look at the 6 books with the 7th coming.
Okay. And then the 3rd of The Loch. Is there anything you can tell us about what we can expect with The Loch? I know you just, on Facebook, you just had a little sneak peek, which was really exciting. What can you tell listeners who maybe haven't been to your Facebook page yet?
The Loch, Heaven's Lake is a glacier lake at the top of a mountain in China that borders China and North Korea. And they've spotted a lot of sea creatures, some kind of lake monsters they call them, but nobody knows what these things are. So the Chinese government decides to host a scientific expedition where the scientists are divided into their teams by nation, and they're given 2 weeks to come up with a thesis on what these creatures are, hopefully to film as well. And then they'll pare it down from 10 nations participating in this study to 3, and then finally 1, and decide who has determined the origin of the species. This is the most credible about it, hoping that they'll get film of the creatures as well. So Zachary Wallace, who's the hero of The Loch, is struggling. Since he resolved the Loch Ness Monster mystery, his life has not been very good. Drum the Drocket and the other communities around Loch Ness are basically going bankrupt because they have no tourism industry anymore. So he has an opportunity to represent Scotland in this contest, and he goes over, and nothing is as it seems.
Oh, that sounds exciting, though. Yeah, and I tell you what, I mean, going back to the second one, I understand that the fans were split on it, but, definitely as a writer looking back on it, I thought it was really, really brave, and I really appreciate that you were so willing to do something different. And I definitely look at that as that you were doing what you wanted to do, which is important, I think, as an author, is to write the story that you want to write. And like you said, write something that you want to read. And it's not always what everybody wants to read, but it was something you want to write, and I'm excited that there's a third one coming up. I can't wait to. I'm definitely going to be logging in there and picking up one of those for myself.
Thank you.
So, like I said, everybody, the pre-order is available now for The Loch, Heaven's Lake. Get on over to Steve Alten's website. We're going to have a link in the show notes, so you can click on that. Don't forget to sign up for that fantastic newsletter. I'm still just blown away. I'm totally fanboying out here, getting to talk to one of my longtime heroes. Steve, thank you so much for being a guest. Where else would be a good place for people to find and follow you?
Well, if you go to stevealten.com, there's my personal email is there, and that's the only email that I've ever had. And it's in all my books, and I do answer my email, as you know, personally. And that's the best way to get in touch with me.
All right. Yeah, and I want to say thank you to Kelly for helping me get in touch with you. That was fantastic and totally unexpected to suddenly get a message from her saying, yeah, reach out to him. So that was great. Thank you, Kelly. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to step aside and listen with bated breath as one of my author heroes reads us a chapter from the upcoming book, The Loch, Heaven's Lake.
Prologue, Dulce, New Mexico. The darkness was all-consuming. Aided by a late winter storm, it conspired with a dense cloud cover to reveal the stars and moon in heavens, effectively snuffing all life from existence. It swallowed the lake and the motorized rubber raft, its occupants unable to see their own hands as they shielded their face from a frigid headwind blistering them with darts of hail and rain. There were 2 men aboard the Zodiac, neither was whom he claimed the other to be. Rick John Anderson was seated in the bow. A big man, the Dulce resident, carried 200 pounds on a 6-foot frame. A 2-day stubble ran across his face in contrast to his scalp, which he kept shaved clean. With the canvas of tattoos covering his arms and upper torso, the local looked more like a member of Hell's Angels than an Apache. The fact that he lived on the Jicarilla Reservation either meant he met the required 3/8 American Indian heritage, or he held sway over the Jicarilla Reservation's Board of Regents, to which he was a voting member. Anderson's hands were numb from gripping the bottom of the bench seat, and his body was shivering, though more out of fear than the frigid temperatures. He had been tasked with locating the black Dodge Ram pickup truck they had left on the shoreline that he could no longer see. Absent a flashlight, a disposable light, or a pack of matches, he might as well have been searching for icebergs. His eyes widened as the Zodiac's bow and bow wake suddenly blossomed out of the pitch. Turning in the direction of the winding outboard engine, he saw a lone figure hunched over an open laptop, its luminous screen cutting through the night, the computer shielded from the driving rain by a plastic poncho. Is it still out there, Professor Crawl? The British scientist ignored the local man's need for reassurance, his attention focused on the progress of the data uploading on his computer. Born in India, raised in England, he had attended the best schools in the United Kingdom, but never seemed to fit in, his peers preferring to judge him by his ethnicity and physical appearance, his wavy black hair worn long and unkempt, matched by a 5 o'clock shadow. This led many of his older colleagues to underestimate his intelligence, typecasting him as a glorified graduate student rather than a brilliant academic, despite his having earned 3 doctorate degrees in the sciences by the age of 27. Answer me, Charles, is the creature still out there or not? The scientist looked up. He had met Rick Anderson 10 hours earlier over breakfast, the interview arranged by the local man's cousin, Katrina Scott, the waitress he had been hitting on since his arrival in Dulce. He introduced himself to the attractive brunette as Professor Charles Crawl. He was in town for a few weeks, hired by a private British investment firm to prepare a business prospectus on Jicarilla's 7 lakes. Unfamiliar with the Apache reservation, he needed to hire a local outdoorsman to assist him in collecting water vegetation and tissue samples from any wildlife inhabiting the lakes. Over dinner, she suggested her cousin Rick, who was an avid fisherman. Crawl offered Anderson the job, never suspecting that Katrina Scott was actually a Delta Force intel officer. For his part, the British scientist never mentioned that the wildlife he sought tissue samples from was a 30-foot-long water creature. My cousin really likes you. Be ashamed to screw up what could be the night of your life. He's desperate, afraid. Use it. Of course it's still out there, Rick. Where else would it go? Where is it? Is it showing up in your drone's sonar? I told you I had to divert all power from the Barracuda in order to upload tissue samples. As soon as the data finishes transmitting, I promise I will finish recharging the drone and activate the sonar array. How much longer? He jiggled the laptop mouse, causing the sleeping screen to momentarily awaken. We're at 82%, figure another minute or 2. The flash of artificial light seemed to calm the local. You knew it was here. It's what brought you to Dulce. There is no here. Dulce is not a real lake. It is a man-made reservoir, as you astutely pointed out during your interview. The animal that chased after us was not birthed in these waters, nor is there an aquatic-based food chain in place among any of the 7 lakes that could support a biologic as large as. What about humans? As a food source, while lions and tigers and sharks may occasionally feast on a human, man has never been nor will ever be a part of any animal's diet. Tell that to the tourist who died 2 years ago at Loch Ness. That was an entirely different lake and creature. Yeah, well, whatever that thing was that attacked sure seemed intent on eating us. Had you not blasted it with that sonic noise thing, I doubt we would have survived. The local had a point. The biologic chosen for tonight's demonstration clearly had no human constraints or restraints hardwired into its DNA. The screen blinked on, indicating data upload was now complete. Closing the computer, he unzipped his jacket pocket and removed the pair of ski goggles equipped with night vision lenses. He strapped them in place over his eyes, causing the darkness to bloom into shades of olive green, the lake an ominous dark gray abyss. Reaching for the car battery squeezed between his feet, he flipped the toggle switch, diverting power from his laptop to the drone. Nicknamed Barracuda for his resemblance to the predatory fish, the remotely operated underwater drone was 3 feet long from the tip of its triangular snout to the propulsion unit and rudder which made up its tail assembly. 14 inches in diameter and streamlined like a torpedo, the neutrally buoyant craft could handle depths up to 900 feet, had a range just short of 2 miles, and could reach speeds exceeding 40 knots. Housed in an acrylic tube anchored to the starboard side of the Zodiac, the drone was designed to safely acquire tissue samples from biologics. Located inside its spring-loaded snout were 3 rotating collection tubes. Any soft tissue impact with the Barracuda exceeding 20 pounds psi was enough to encourage the razor-sharp teeth-like blades anchored inside its snout and excise a finger-sized bite from its target. The scientists waited until the recharging battery reached 30% before he powered on the drone's active sonar, sending a loud ping racing through the depths. The sound wave reverberated off every object located within a 2-mile radius, the time and strength of the return signal converted into electronic signals, the sonar's sweeping hand illuminating the creature. It had been shadowing them as they had followed a course to the south, the man-made reservoir shaped like the state of Florida to silence its panhandle. As it had in their earlier encounter, the sound wave spooked the life form as he watched the biologic race to the east and disappeared. What the hell? Crawl, can you see it? Stand by. Unable to locate the creature, the scientists released another ping, the sound wave failing to find the animal even as it painted the shoreline directly ahead of them. Bloody hell. Before he could veer away, the Zodiac's bow struck the man-made lake's 8-foot-high embankment, the effective result of local authorities having recently drained nearly 20% of the reservoir. The sudden impact launched Rick Anderson head over heels from his bench seat, hurling him back first and upside down against the moss-covered wall of rock. The British scientist didn't fare much better. With nothing to grab onto, he found himself airborne, flailing headfirst through the olive-green void, the embankment blooming in his vision. Kicking out his legs, he managed to snag one of the middle seats with his right foot, only to bash his face against the port side inflatable. A painful collision, breaking his nose and shattering his night vision goggles, casting him into the darkness. Crawl, you okay? No. He snorted a mouthful of blood, gagged and spit it out. Can you smell that? My nose is broken. I can't smell anything. I can. I smelled the same scent when the creature surfaced. Anderson, the creature's gone. The sonar spooked it. You're wrong. You think you're so clever, don't you, Dr. Singh? That's right. I know who you are. Timon Singh, Nobel Prize-winning geneticist. You disappeared off the face of Earth 9 years ago before you could get to Oslo to collect your money. What happened? Did you find the needs of the private sector too? Timon froze. His pulse raced. His body trembled. More unnerving than Rick Anderson's screams was the abrupt silence that followed, as if nature had suddenly been placed on mute. The only sounds were small waves lapping against the bottom end of the inflatable raft and his pounding heart. He registered a strange tapping on his ski jacket. For a surreal moment, he ceased shaking as a soothing, warm rain rolled down his neck and into his undergarments. And then he realized it was blood. Very slowly, he slid his right hand into his pants pocket. Feeling the rental car's keyless entry, he pressed the alarm. The incessant horn blasts and flashing headlights vanquished the darkness, revealing the monster. Intelligent and amphibious, it had been lying in wait atop the embankment next to the pickup truck. Leaning over the ledge, it had plucked the local sportsman from the embankment by his head, its scalpel-sharp teeth 4 to 5 inch long needles, puncturing the man's neck, shoulders, and chest, the blood spurting as if it was from a fountain. Suspended 6 feet above the water, Rick Anderson's legs thrashed and kicked wildly at the night, the dying man in agony. My God, he's still alive. Timon's limbs shook in terror as the beast glanced down at him with one of its jaundiced yellow eyes and hissed. Oh, God. The funnel of light cut through the sleep-laden night, blinding the hideous predator. It shook its massive head, whipping its bizarre mane of tendrils to and fro, each oily cord-like whisker as large as a grown man's arm and as thick as a thumb. As the monster screeched in protest, a barrage of 8-inch-long tranquilizer darts struck its neck like a swarm of giant mosquitoes, burying the elixir held within their syringes into a patch of flesh behind the fish's gill slits. The diamond-shaped head rolled up twice before collapsing out of Timon's sight, lying with a resounding thud. Before he could gather his thoughts, a team of soldiers dressed head to boots in black parkas and matching jumpsuits were dragging him up the steep embankment. He was wrapped in a thermal blanket, one of the commandos demanding his attention. Keys. He reached into his pocket and handed him the keys to the truck. The horn alarm silenced as he was led to the back of an awaiting van. Just before the door slammed closed and the syringe pierced the marine biologist's neck, his eyes locked onto a gated exit, a track lighting illuminating a 12-foot by 10-foot sign. Warning, property of DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Dulcie military installation. Trespassers will be arrested, and the word prosecuted was crossed out with the word eaten.
Trespassers will be eaten. That is awesome. And that was Steve Alten reading a sample chapter from his latest book, The Loch, Heaven's Lake. The book is available for pre-order right now. Don't miss your chance to get a copy of this for yourself. Get over to stevealten.com or click the link in the show notes and get your copy ordered today. I've already got mine. Don't forget to also click the link in the show notes for our friends and sponsors of the show. Really appreciate it when you do that. And don't forget to also hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out next week when we come back with a new author, a new book, and a new sample chapter. You never know who it's going to be. Take care, everyone. We'll see you again real soon.